Splatoon 3 has easily become my favorite competitive game to play as of late, and I've honestly wanted to do more videos just talking about this game because I really have a blast with it. And the one thing that I've always wanted to do is rank all of the stages. I feel like I have a lot to talk about in terms of, how this game is designed and stuff, so I just want to give my own personal ranking of every stage in the game, sharing my thoughts, feelings, what makes a stage good or bad, and how it functions in the overall game. It's the first of two parts, stick around if you want to see it. Just a quick side note, I'm not going to be counting any tricolor variants of stages or any big run variants, since I didn't really do that much big run, and tricolor I feel like could be its own separate video. But with all that out of the way, hi, my name is Soul, and here's my ranking of every multiplayer stage in Splatoon 3, starting with the bottom half. At every ranking, you gotta start at the bottom, and for me, that stage at the bottom is Hammerhead Bridge. It's a bit of a shame, honestly, because I never actually got a chance to play Splatoon 1, and so I never really got to play the version of this stage from that game. Because apparently, in that game, this stage is really good. It's unfortunately not the case in this game. See, the thing about this stage is that it is just entirely one straight line from one end to the other. If you're playing a frontline weapon, it can be frustrating because you have to force your way through to the front lines, and if you're playing a backline weapon, then it's just kind of boring because you're just kind of sitting back with nothing to do. This stage is so linear that honestly, I don't feel anything winning or losing on this stage. I just kind of feel nothing. At number 23, we got Scorch Gorge. Now, I remember being a really big fan of this stage when the game first came out, but nowadays my opinion of this stage has really tanked. I think my thoughts on this stage can best be summed up in it feels like two separate stages. Because getting from one end to the other of this stage is just such a pain. It's really not that fun of a stage to play on, and it's a stage that my opinion of it has only gotten worse as time goes on. Next up, we have Mincemeat Metalworks. Now, this is a stage that I actually liked quite a bit at the beginning of Splatoon 3, and as I started to play it a lot more, I started to see this stage's flaws really start to peek out. I think this stage's biggest flaw is immediately apparent when you just put a wave breaker down in the middle and you can see that it covers pretty much the entire middle of the stage. Now, granted, I put this stage above the other one because this stage at least has some cool movement options, but it doesn't change the fact that despite being a relatively open stage, if you look at the map, it really doesn't feel like it, and it feels like your options are extremely limited on this stage. Now moving on to the next tier of our list, we have Brinewater Springs. At one point, this was my least favorite stage in the game, but I could see some of the strengths that this stage has. I think its biggest strength is that it's small. Yeah, I know, it's a bit of an oxymoron considering the fact that this is the very thing that people complain about, but I don't think a small stage in of itself is a bad thing. I think a small stage allows frontline weapons to really thrive, but it still doesn't change the fact that this stage is small, meaning that there's barely any room to run around, meaning that if frontline weapons can't get in, backline weapons are all the more oppressive. It feels relatively limited, and despite the fact that I said before that a small stage isn't a bad thing, I don't think this stage was meant with the express purpose of being a small stage. It was just kind of designed as a stage that happened to be small. Next up might be a stage that might surprise some people who have played this game a lot, Eeltail Alley. A lot of people would put this stage at the very bottom of their list, and I can definitely see why. But for me, this stage goes here solely because of one mode, tower control. I really like tower control on this stage, and in fact I think this is one of the better tower control maps in the game. It's really fun. But one mode doesn't exactly save this stage for me. Every other mode on this stage is not fun. Splat zones especially can be painful because not only is this the case, but the zone is also gigantic, and so sometimes you reach a spot in the game where a team physically just can't come back at all because they physically cannot cap the zone in time because it is so big. It's kind of like Hammerhead Bridge if it was a little better designed, in my opinion. But a long hallway is still a long hallway. And finally, to round out our C tier, we have Sturgeon Shipyard. This was a stage that I originally would put way higher if this was the beginning of the game. But over the years, as I find myself playing it more and more, I find myself liking it less and less. Yes, it's got some cool movement options. Yes, the moving bridges are pretty cool. Yes, this has some of the coolest paintable walls in the series, and it has some cool spots that you can go to. But it's just strange. It's a stage that, while relatively open, still feels rather limited. It's an interesting oxymoron, but ultimately this stage just doesn't have a lot going for it. Not to mention that Clam Blitz is one of the worst modes to play on this stage because it is just way too easy to score. I honestly don't have too much more to say about this stage. After this, we have Wahoo World. Now, this stage again, I know I sound like a broken record here, but I liked this stage at the beginning of the game, and now I still kind of like this stage. I actually really like this stage on zones. Along with Eel Tail Alley, I'd say these are probably my stages that I like that people typically dislike. I think that it's really fun, but on every other mode, it's just not. And I really do not like the fact that your main route into the middle of the stage is not activated half of the game unless you're playing Splat Zones and, to an extent, Tower Control. And the carousel in the middle is a nice novel idea, but I ultimately find that it doesn't really work well in practice. Then we have Hagglefish Market. I know that a lot of people think that this is one of the better stages in the game, and to be fair, it is probably one of the better of the Splatoon 3 original stages. That doesn't mean that I think it's the best though. In fact, I think it's not even the best Splatoon 3 original stage, as you'll see later. Theming isn't too much of a qualification for me, but honestly, it factors into it here. I really don't like the theme of this stage. And on top of that, I honestly just find this stage really boring to play, practically. It's not a stage that ever surprises me, or a stage that I'm even excited to play on. It's just kind of a stage that exists. After this, we have Flounder Heights, and I think the process of getting footage for this stage pretty much communicates what I wanted to say. Pretty much every match that I recorded of this stage was either a total sweep in one direction or the other, and I think that represents the big problem with this stage. Despite it being designed around verticality, which, you know, is the whole thing for Splatoon, it still feels super congested and narrow, and yeah, there are tons of options and stuff, but when you're trapped in your base in this stage, it really doesn't feel like you have a way out, despite there being plenty. And to round off our B tier, I'm going to talk about these next two stages at the same time, Umami Ruins and Humpback Pump Track. Similar to Flounder Heights, I feel like these stages both have pretty good things to them, with Humpback being a really good stage on Turf War, and Umami getting a really good stage rework. But overall, I just think that these stages have qualities to them that just make them fall flat for me. Humpback, again, feels pretty restrictive despite its really unique gimmick in the bike track stuff, along with having some of the lowest amount of inkable walls in the entire series. And Umami still feels extremely tight to move on despite its rework. The structure in the center is pretty cool, but fighting in any area other than this just kind of feels whatever to me, and so that's why these stages are going down here. That's it for now, but stay tuned for my next video where I'll be ranking the top half of the list. See you then!